right. Hey, everybody. This is Jami Mullikin, and we're here for Inside the 90. And I'm very excited today to have my friend Forrest Derr on with us. So, Forrest, take it away. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where your EOS journey began.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jamie. I enjoy talking to anybody about EOS, but I know we've already had some conversations in the past, so kindred spirit, so to speak. So I started EOS back in about January of 2019. A visionary of a company I was working for, is a company called AltaWorks. The visionary read Traction. Probably a similar story I've heard from other people. He threw the book at me across my desk and said, "We're going to do this. You need to figure it out." I was VP of Finance, I think, at the time. So once I read that book, I realized that I was a closet integrator. And I don't know if you have come across that terminology before. I've talked to many people over the years that realized they were closet integrators. But read the book, realized that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. We went through a process of hiring an implementer pretty quickly. I think we self-implemented for about 30 days, gave up very quickly.
Yeah.
And hired an implementer and went to town from there, and just have been loving every minute of it.
Did your visionary actually read the book before giving it to you?
He actually read the book.
So there's two visionary types I'm finding. Read the book, or like, hey, read this book.
Somebody told me this was a good book. You ought to read it, right?
Yeah.
No, he actually reads lots of books and still does, I'm sure, to this day. But this was one of many books. But I think the big differentiator for me is it was not a book of, hey, read this book. This is cool, and then next month there's another book, and then next month there's another book. This was a book that really transformed him and myself as well.
Very cool. And how did he get introduced to the book?
Somebody gave it to him, just somebody in his network. I don't even remember who gave it to him, but somebody gave him the book and recommended it to him, and after he read it, he handed it off to me.
Back during that time, I guess, give a little context to the business,
Sure.
the scale of it, and was there a ceiling that y'all knew you were hitting?
Yeah, I don't think we were hitting a ceiling per se. We just knew we could be a lot better. So I think when I started the company, it was probably about $1 million in revenue. I think we had 7 employees, and we were scaling and growing the company. But we started realizing there were some challenges internally with the visionary. Basically, and we really didn't see this until after we read the book as a leadership team. He would come in and go to different people in the company and share a nugget of something with them. But we didn't understand what was going on until the 3 or 4 of us got together and put all the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out what he was talking about. And so that concept of confusion by visionary was probably our biggest issue that was overcome by going through Traction.
Oh, very cool. And then did you already have a leadership team in place, or was it the beginning of?
Yeah, so we had a leadership team in place. We were meeting on a weekly basis, so we were quasi doing, some best practices, even though we didn't know what EOS was. But we were definitely not following the 90-minute format. We were definitely not creating rocks and creating to-dos and creating that accountability. So it really put gasoline on a fire for us to accelerate how quickly we could operate and how quickly we could make decisions and impact change in the business.
Was, early on, what did that, feel like from reading a book to getting, some leadership alignment, and how did you start to bring employees into that mix?
Yeah, so initially we all read the book as a leadership team. We hired an implementer. We started using 90 software. I think we implemented by ourselves for 30 days. I think we tried to use Excel for 30 days and gave up and hired and brought in 90 software, which made a huge difference for the way we could implement it. But
yeah, shout out to 90 for me too. Same thing here. We did ClickUp and spreadsheets, and it's like, just commit, do it.
And it's amazing. I've been to the EOS conference and talked to companies that are, $100 million companies with 200 employees, and they're using Excel, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? I don't know how you do it. So we implemented with 90. We had our leadership team for the first quarter. We did the Focus Day 1, Focus Day 2, because we went through an implementer. And then I think it was probably about 6 months in that we started rolling it out to the next level of management. So we had a ops leader, finance leader, sales and marketing leader. We rolled it out to those teams, and those teams started having meetings. And I'd say it took at least 18 months before it was really I could look back and say, all right, we've got this. We're doing well at this.
Gotcha.
And we kept an implementer for 4 years,
Oh,
which,
wow.
most people are, 18 months, 2 years, something like that. Our implementer, Gene Moorhead, kept telling me that he needed to fire us because we didn't need him anymore. But we liked having an implementer and liked keeping that discipline of that quarterly cadence. So,
So going back to finding an implementer, I mean, if y'all
sure.
read the book, implemented for
Yep.
30 days, and then hired an implementer, what was that process like?
Yeah, so we did a search and found 3 implementers that were regionally in our area and had them come to our office and do that 90-minute meeting, 3 of them, 3 different times, and chose an implementer that we felt like was not necessarily the most dynamic implementer, but was the most disciplined implementer. And
Okay.
that was the catalyst for us. I actually was leaning toward a different implementer because I thought a different one was more dynamic that we had come in. But my visionary, had the right concept. Get somebody that knows the system and is disciplined in the system, and it'll all work out. And it did.
And was that discipline something that complemented what y'all had? So you wanted someone with that, or did you have a void there and you're like, we don't have the discipline, therefore we need someone who can hold us accountable?
I would say it complemented it, but
Okay.
having somebody to hold us accountable was key. I mean, he was. Gene and I would tangle up
Yeah.
many a times, many quarterly meetings. We tangle up over some stuff, which was a good thing to have that discussion. But he definitely held me accountable as integrator to make sure that we were following EOS Pure, and I think that's the reason that I've been EOS Pure in the organizations I've worked in.
So you said it took about 18 months to really get that traction.
Yeah.
What were some challenges along the way that y'all found?
One of the big challenges that we had was overextending ourselves on rocks. So we were making rocks because we thought we understood them and thought we knew how to get things done. So I would say the first 3 quarters, we sucked at rocks. It was horrible because we just thought we could accomplish more. And one of the worst rocks that I have seen in organizations that I've worked in, and I continue to see to this day with people, is that it's hire and onboard a salesperson.
Yeah.
That rock is just not realistic. To go find somebody, recruit them, hire them, and onboard them. No, you can probably find one and make an offer to one maybe in 3 months. But really the rocks and being able to build those out in such a way so that they're smart, I think that was probably the biggest challenge for us. And it demotivates you when you don't get things done. And so we had to work through that process to ask ourselves, very disciplined, is this rock attainable? Is this rock smart? And we got better at it. It just took time.
Yeah, we've ended up, through 2 different businesses that I was involved with EOS, both were marketing agencies, where we have, 4 steps. The first two is discover the current state and what the ideal future state is and come up with a plan. And that's 1 quarter. Like we just do those first steps in a quarter for 1 rock. And then the next is activate it and train everybody else up on it.
Right.
Just because especially as the nature of rocks, and they're important, but they crunch to the end and you're trying to, half bake something and convince everybody that it tastes good because you had to hit a deadline.
Right. Trust me, it's good.
Yeah.
You'll like it. Yeah.
So going through, getting to that 18-month mark, but you said, y'all ran with Gene for 4 years. So give us just a little bit more of that journey and what impact overall did it have on the business?
Yeah, I think Gene was good for us to help us stay on track in those quarterly meetings. And I will say from experience, after we graduated from him, and then the last organization I worked in where they had already had an implementer and graduated before I got there, it's challenging, as an integrator to be able to run that quarterly or annual meeting, but then also participate in that meeting.
Correct.
And I know you're an integrator as well, so I'm sure you probably have a similar issue with that.
Well, and I was actually professionally trained 20 years ago in facilitation, and one of the rules is facilitators don't participate. So I came into EOS with that mentality, which is like, all right, if I'm up here facilitating the room, then I got to let other people participate. So I personally too have found, in both organizations I've been a part of, we used an implementer and just let them be the facilitator so that we can participate, even as an integrator, allowing others to facilitate that process. But then definitely now I'm in the visionary seat. So I need both my integrator and a facilitator because I'm the problem child, right? I gotta keep they gotta keep me, on track and focused.
Well, and I think what's good about us using him for 4 years was we really got to go through all of the EOS tools and get to learn them and understand them. And with him facilitating, one of the big things that he did for us, or for me, I guess, was helped handle, differences of opinion on how things should be done within EOS. And so one of the second or third quarterly meeting we had, Director of Operations and myself were disagreeing about how something should be done. And we both were button heads, both, frustrated with each other in that meeting. And it was interesting for Gene to sit back and look at both of us and ask both of us questions. And I'm not going to say that Gene said I was right, but there definitely was alignment after that. It set it up to where when you got a third party that's outside that has no skin in the game, has no, impact on the personalities in the business, that person can really look at something objectively and help you guys make decisions as a team.
Yeah, very cool. And then, so that was your first experience, first company, right? And you've been integrator in multiple companies.
Correct.
So let's talk about that second experience. Where how did you what did it look like to onboard there, and what stage was that company in?
Yeah, so the next company I worked at was a landscaping company, and they had already implemented EOS, had an implementer. I think they were 2 years in when I got there. So the implementer was no longer there. And really what they needed was some help just fine-tuning some things and pushing EOS through the organization. And what ended up happening as I got into the company and started looking, basically poking around, the meeting structure was... They were big fans of EOS. They had implemented EOS, and they understood, or their impression was, everybody had to have multiple meetings in EOS. And so the example that I found was there was one guy that was in 7 L10s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In a landscaping company. And it was interesting when I got in there and started poking around. I'm like, what is this guy? How does he even work if he's in 7 L10s? And so it was really an accountability chart issue is what it ended up being. So as we started looking at the accountability chart, this guy's sitting in 3 seats. Shouldn't have been in 7 L10s, but he was sitting in 3 seats. And so we went through a seat by seat, structured the company to make sure the right people in the right seat. Yes, there were some people that had to be in multiple seats just because of the nature of where the company was. But at the end of the day, we got people in the right meetings and got those meetings on track the way they needed to be.
And so I assume in a landscaping organization, that's not an office job for everybody, right? So you had people out in the field. How did you structure? Was everyone in the organization participating?
Good question. So I defined it as salaried employees were in 90 and operating in L10s, and then I called them foremen, the foreman in the meetings, or the foreman in the group. They were out with their helpers, and I think there were probably 25 foremen out there. So there's a decent sized organizations. Those foremen sat in an abbreviated meeting, 60-minute L10 basically. So the foremen were in meetings once a week, and then they were the field people that were actually the helpers out there, guys on shovels. They were not necessarily sitting in meetings.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's a common, I think I'm guilty of looking at EOS through the lenses of the businesses that I know and understand.
Right.
And it's agnostic, right?
Yes.
So there's, whether you're manufacturing or technology or landscaping. So how, I guess, that most likely is not typical in a landscaping organization. How did the foremen respond to that structure?
Yeah, I think they liked it once we started doing it the way it needed to be done, where they were sharing good news, personal and professional. I definitely had some that were resistant to it just because they didn't understand it. They'd not sat in a professional meeting. They're typically working with their hands and field personnel. So it took some time for them to, get into the groove. But I got positive feedback after we started doing it the way it needed to be done.
Very cool. And then what, we think, so you've had 2 long tenure, scaled implementations or roles within
Yeah.
EOS. But what within both of them, like what's the challenge that they both shared that you think is maybe common struggles for other people that you really faced and you had to dig
Yeah.
in and figure out how to get through it?
People problems. It's always people problems. You can have the best structure in the world and getting the right person in the right seat. That is the biggest challenge that I faced in every organization. One organization had the wrong person on the leadership team. And when you got to make changes on that leadership team, that gets can be very emotional, especially if you've got somebody that's a long tenured employee. So aligning that leadership team, but then aligning all the other seats to make sure the right person in the right seat. I listened to a podcast recently, and one of the challenges, with people is the C players. It's the C player that does a decent job, is humble, committed to the company, core value fit, but just keeps missing the mark. But you struggle because you just keep thinking, if I can only give them some more time, if I can only give them some more training, they're real hard to root out and go and get the A players that you need.
Yeah, and I think there's that saying, what the greatest way to lose an A player is not get rid of a C player, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah, and
employees
I've
see
seen that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to to getting right people on the bus, how have you found good ways to do that?
Really defining the role clearly. I think that's the biggest challenge that I've seen is when we start having an issue, a people issue. A lot of time it maybe the role is not defined clear enough to make sure that person can fit in that seat. So the company I'm working with right now, they've got a guy that's a core value fit, would jump in front of a bus for you, been with the company for 30 years. But I challenged the leadership team this week. I said, what does this seat need to do? Let's list that out and love the guy, but if he can't meet the needs of that seat, then we're hurting the organization. So can you find another seat for him? Definitely don't make a seat, but is there another seat that makes sense for him? But you've got to clearly define those roles, and I just continue to see challenges with role definement where people will try to define a role for a person rather than defining a role for the organization. So,
yeah, and I've found that starts with the accountability chart, right? Getting the right accountability chart, and we're a small team. We have maybe 7 actual seats on the bus, but our bus has 23 seats.
Yeah, yeah,
So 7 of us are
Yeah.
filling those seats, and you're swapping
Yeah.
hats every day. So
Yeah.
making sure that you can have a good plan. Actually, we had a one-on-one today. One-on-ones aren't necessarily part of an EOS structure. I'm still a
Right.
fan of a one-on-one when done.
I am too.
Yeah, periodically, not every week.
Yeah.
But we had one where I asked for some feedback for me and got some, and was getting some challenge. And I said, all right, let's throw the core values up and look at this first. And then as we split it down, it really wasn't a core values thing. It was because I wear 2 hats. One's very high in the organization, and the other's very low. And I'm making decisions based off of my low hat. But it's being perceived as, hey, you're the boss. We got to do what you say.
Right, right,
And
yeah.
so we use that to kind of parse it all out and just get clarity on, all right, well, I'm seeing it this way, and you're giving me feedback this way, and let's parse all that out. But it takes a really good accountability chart to be able to have those conversations and then be able to make sure you have roles structured right.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with the multiple seats. I mean, I in every organization I've worked in, there's always people in multiple seats. It's just there's not I haven't worked in a company yet that's got 250 employees and everybody's got a seat and there's no duplicate.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing I found interesting, and I actually heard this at an EOS conference a couple of years ago, was making sure to put your trusted vendors and your contractors on the accountability chart. So put your CPA on there, put your lawyer on there, put your patent attorney or whatever. Put a subcontractor that does SEO for your website or whatever it is, And we implemented that at the first company I worked at and the second and third company, and it really makes a big difference to be able to make sure you've got the right seats filled by the right vendors as well.
Yeah, that's actually something I haven't actually thought about that, and it's timely. So we, look at our core processes and we map those to our internal hats.
Yeah.
But that's a good way to fill some voids in those.
Yes.
These processes still have to. You still got to file your taxes.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
But really looking at, all right, what are the processes that we have going on that we don't have someone doing but are still critical to the business, and making sure that those are there. So I'm going to add that to ours.
Well, and it forces you to think about seats, and as you grow the organization, you may need to get a full-time CPA. You may need to get
Yeah.
a full-time CFO or whatever. But the other thing that it's interesting is it'll help you think about your subcontractors, your trusted vendors like that, as to whether they're a core value fit. And I can tell
Very
you that
good.
I have
Yeah.
fired vendors for not being core value aligned, because if you got a vendor that's not, and you can't fire a giant vendor like Walmart if they're a vendor.
Yeah,
You wouldn't have
right.
them on there anyway. But your toast tight knit 1099 subcontractors, if they're not a core value fit, do you really want them working with your customers? Do you really want them working with your team? So
Yeah, no, that's a very, very powerful insight on that. And I think
yeah,
it's also, just for listeners out there, EOS says it's 10 to 250 employees, and I think
yeah,
there's some wisdom in that, because like we're 7 people, and we started with EOS day one. There were 3 of us. We have implemented before, so we knew some of these hurdles, but a lot of the complexity of org chart works itself out a little bit once you start getting into over 10 employees. But less than that, it's pretty messy. And
yeah.
so that's what I would recommend, is if they're smaller and they're using the core principles of EOS and they're trying to roll it out, accept the fact that there's going to be some complexity
Sure.
the smaller that you are.
Yeah.
So transitioning now, so you worked with those 2 organizations, and then you've been a fractional integrator for a while, correct?
Yeah, so at the last organization I worked for, one of the pitches I gave the visionary was he had multiple businesses. He had a CrossFit gym and a jiu-jitsu gym and the landscaping company. And the landscaping company was obviously the largest of the businesses, but the other 2 were smaller. And so we had leadership teams at this other smaller one. So I tell everybody I fractionally played in the fractional space, but I had a full-time salary
Yeah.
and didn't get paid out of the other 2, which was a good experience for me to work with different leadership teams and totally different businesses, and just cultural differences and everything. But last November, got to a point where it made sense for me to go out on my own. I had it on my 5-year plan on my personal VTO, and yes, I have a personal VTO as well as a business VTO. But in my 5-year plan, I was going to go out and be a fractional integrator. And after my time period at Sexton Landscape, it just looked like it was time for me to go ahead and do that. So hung my shingle out and went to town, and been doing that for the last 30 days. So
Very cool. And I think, I kind of hopped over this in the beginning, but,
yeah,
there's a really strong EOS community I found on LinkedIn. And, just through following different people that have interest, whether they're, integrators, a unique word, so you can find people. But we organically got connected on LinkedIn, and then had a mutual friend connect us. And this is one of those examples of just LinkedIn coming to life and, creating a cool relationship and conversations here. How have you found your fractional integrator roles?
Yeah. So I've been a big, proponent of helping first, and that, I know it's one of the EOS core values. And there's a concept called net weaving. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I don't know if we talked about it on our call, but I had a mentor introduce me to net weaving versus networking, and Matt LaHood, he's still a great friend. And what he explained to me is that net weaving is, helping others and introducing others without any thought of what you might get out of it.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure the person that introduced us was net weaving. He had nothing to get out of it
Absolutely.
other than, but I never had a term for it. So net weaving is a term that's been drilled into my head over the last 4 years probably. And what I've been doing is just introducing people for years. And, I'm sitting here talking to somebody, and I'm like, who could I introduce them to that would create value for both of them? boom. All right, I'm going to introduce, Jamie to Joe, and I introduce you guys. And I've been doing that for years. And what was interesting about that is having that concept and helping people without anything in return has come around. So now people have been introducing me to people since I threw my shingle out
Yeah.
there.
No, that's actually, consider that term stolen.
Yeah, go for it. You can use it. You can use
I've
it.
always said that because I'm wired the same way. And
Yeah.
Strength Finders, I'm high connector and relator.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm just always trying to,
Yeah.
connect people and
Yeah.
opportunities. And through that, so when we first met, you graciously just said, "Hey, I've got an integrator playbook. Like, can I
Yep.
email it to you?" And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I've given that to my integrator Warren, and
Yeah.
you literally like have a step-by-step guide on how to get integrators connected so they can
Yes.
share and learn from each other. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that. Is that still just a
Yeah.
Word doc, or is it more than
Yeah,
that?
well, it's actually a bit better looking slide deck. I need to get it over to you. I've been working on it, but it's called ENRG. It's a EOS Networking Resource Group. Full transparency, it's not affiliated with EOS in any way. It's just finding EOS like-minded people. And it started out of me trying to find integrators. So I was going to the EOS conference every year. I was excited when I would come back, pumped up, ready to, work on my accountability chart or work on my VTO or whatever. And I wanted to maintain that excitement. And so in 2021, into 2021, I started looking to see if I could find any local EOS companies, particularly integrators in this area. Struggled, just couldn't find anybody. So then I ended up posting on social media a couple of times, and I found one visionary that was not my visionary that showed up to a coffee shop, and we had an hour-long meeting. How do we find more people on EOS? And we said, why don't we open it up to anybody that's open to visionary, integrator, or on the leadership team? And I had 11 people show up
Wow.
to that first meeting. And so we have been running that since January of 2022. We've got a chapter in Fairhope. There's about 20 to 25 people that show up once a month, and it's a very loosely organized L10 meeting. The L10 meeting is very organized, but the group is very loosely organized, and it's all people that are fans of EOS. That's really what it is.
And so when y'all get together, is it structured, or are y'all IDSing? What's it look like?
Yeah, it's structured. So we go through an L10, and we go, the whole thing, the segue, the sample scorecard, sample to-dos, et cetera. And when we get to IDS, we discuss a toolbox item. So it could be discuss the accountability chart, it could be discuss rocks, it could be discuss the VTO. And there's a schedule that we follow for which toolbox item that we're going to discuss. But it's interesting because, some people say, well, are you teaching EOS? And I'm like, no, I'm not teaching it. I'm leading a discussion.
Yeah.
And they end up teaching each other. And so it's really more of a facilitating of a conversation. I'll throw the topic out there. I'll pull up my accountability chart for wherever I am, and then we'll start talking about it. And then inevitably it goes to, what about the 555? Well, what about the, VTO? And how does that align with this? And it's just an organic conversation around EOS and how to get better at it.
That is cool. And then how do you, so criteria-wise, is it you have to be an active integrator to participate in an ENRG?
No. This group is anybody that's interested in EOS. So it could be a visionary, it could be a director of ops, it could be an integrator. It's really anybody that is interested in EOS comes to these groups.
Very cool. So in purest sense, it's a peer group.
It's a
people getting
peer
together
group.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm very deliberate about making sure people understand this is not a BNI group. This is not, share 5 leads, I'll give you 5 leads. I'm not naive enough to not realize people are going to do business with each other, and I'm okay with that. But that's not what it's for. It's about getting better at EOS.
Very cool. So you have that locally, and then do you have interest from others?
Yeah. So we have one in Fairhope, Alabama, one in Mobile, Alabama. Santa Barbara just started up yesterday, Santa Barbara, California. Houston was having their first meeting today, and then I got a group in Cleveland starting a meeting next month in February, and then another one in New Orleans. So it's starting to spread, which is what I've been trying to do for the last 3 years, is trying to get more people together, because what ends up happening is it helps the EOS brand. It drives more people to find implementers because they realize that self-implementation is difficult, and it drives more integrators to go to the integrator masterclass too. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's actually a, part of the goal of this podcast is I just want people to hear the benefits of working with an implementer, because you don't really know how you're not pure in your implementation until you're working with someone who's pure in their implementation, and you realize, wow, we got a long way to go, but not in a negative way. It's not it's not a gap. You can see how far you've come. Start today is my thing. If you read the book, start today, that's great. But as soon as you can, commit, and get some help. So,
and answering your question earlier is, where did I find my clients, or how did I find my clients? It was through net weaving, but it was through net weaving through ENRG. That's really the 3 clients that I've got right now, which I've got three clients 1 day a week each. And they all have attended ENRG meetings. So they're at various levels of EOS. Some have implementers, some have already implemented, and they just needed a fractional integrator. But it's through that ENRG group.
Oh, that's awesome. So if someone's listening and they're interested in starting a local group where they are, where do they go?
Yeah, go to ENRG.life. That's a website that we've got created, and there's a form you can fill out, or you can just email me directly at I don't know if you post my email address on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll put that in the link in the podcast notes.
Yeah, just send me an email. I'll be happy to talk to them about it.
And spell ENRG for us.
ENRG.
All right, ENRG.
Yep. ENRG.life. Correct.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
So you've got you're still doing the fractional integrator work today, and you've got ENRG going. Let's talk about that 5-year VTO, man. What's it look like for you?
Yeah, I'm a 5-year VTO now. I really want to continue to do fractional integration, but I probably want to back off to that to maybe only have 1 or 2 clients. And I really feel like integrator coaching is a path that I can take. I've got 2 mentees that I'm working on coaching right now. And I've got another one that I actually just talked to on LinkedIn. Speaking about LinkedIn earlier today, somebody sent me a message and asked me if I was doing that. So I think integrator coaching is probably my long-term path in the next 5 years, just because of the experience and background that I've had, and then just the passion I have about that integrator seat.
Oh, that's cool. A commonality you and I both share is you started in January of 2019 in an organization with EOS. I was April of 2019.
Yeah.
And I've really been a part of one organization where I was the integrator, and then I've launched 2 businesses since then, where I was the visionary, and now we're running on it. So this is really my second entity that I'm a part of EOS on. But you've touched many, right? So especially in your fractional seat. I mean, what do you think is, for someone who's thinking about EOS? What do you think, what's the most common challenge you've seen where someone is like, should I do this or not? And then they do it and they realize how much gain they get out of it. What do you say a common struggle for people considering it but not committing are?
Yeah, and I think specifically talking about the visionary is where the struggle is, because that's the person who really has to drive the initial conversation with EOS. But I would say that a lot of visionaries think that EOS is going to be restrictive and make it difficult for them to do things. And I look at it the exact opposite. And so I've told this story. My first visionary, if you asked him what EOS did for him, he would say it liberated him to do what he loved to do. Yep. And as his integrator, I would tell you it put guardrails around him and kept him in his lane. And we're both right. And we were both right. Yeah. And so I've used an illustration, and I don't know where I got this, so hopefully I'm not taking somebody's copyrighted credit, but if you think about a racehorse, a thoroughbred is going to run and run and run. But if he's not on a track, he's going to run left, he's going to run right, he's going to run over everybody and just tear things up. He'll be moving fast, but he'll be tearing things up along the way. And if you got a racehorse on, the track, and you got that jockey, which is, the integrator, keeping him in his lane and keeping him moving forward and keeping the distractions away from him, he's going to run faster and farther than if he's just running wide out in the open. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge is visionaries' hesitancy to give up and let go of the vine and let their integrator run the company. And, they think it's going to impact their freedom in a negative way, but I would thoroughly argue it's going to actually make it positive.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And then I tell you, a question I get from people regularly who are interested in EOS and they work for a visionary, and either the visionary doesn't know about it or
Yeah.
knows about it.
Yeah.
Any advice on someone who's like, my organization needs this? How do
Yeah.
I get my visionary excited about it?
Subliminal messages, counseling. I don't know. It's tough. I've got some visionaries that I am friends with, and I have been trying to convince them to do it for years, and they just will not do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Yeah.
But it's tough. You got to have real conversations. But at the end of the day, if the visionary does not support the EOS model, then it's never going to work.
Correct.
You could have the best integrator in the world, the best leadership team in the world, and if that visionary is not going to, follow through and stay in his lane or her lane, then it's never going to work.
Yeah. I think that's true too, that it's also not a lifeline, so it's some people look at it and be like, hey, if this doesn't work, nothing will. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily the intent either. But
Right.
if someone's not going to buy in from the top down, then it's just it's not going to work.
Yeah. It's always interesting though, because I've in the businesses that I've been in, I've talked about EOS a lot. Obviously, we try to get our vendors doing EOS.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I try to do that is if the vendor is doing EOS, I know they're going to be a better company. They're going to be growing. They're going to have their processes documented. But I remember a vendor we went and visited up in Atlanta, and he was telling us about some of the struggles he was having. He was a trusted vendor, a software vendor, and said, man, you need to, look at traction. You need to look at EOS. And looked up on his bookshelf behind his desk. He's got a copy of EOS. I'm like, you see that book right there? He said, yeah, somebody gave me that. I'm like, get it out and read it. I mean, so it's amazing how many people have been exposed to it but haven't really dug into it. And there's a lot of traction books out there.
Yeah, definitely. What so on the 20 tools, so there's 20 tools within EOS, and you get exposed to them at different times, but
Sure.
I find that different people really gravitate, have an affinity for specific ones. Like if you think about one tool that you are just vocal about, what would that be?
I'd say it's got to be the people analyzer.
Okay.
And the people analyzer just really changes the conversation to an objective conversation rather than an emotional conversation. And it's one of the tools that, I always have a dry erase board in my office, whatever office I'm in. And it is very quick and easy to throw a people analyzer up on the dry erase board with some lines, and you just go to town.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to help an organization shift the conversation to core values and GWC, because initially they don't understand it. They're this guy's got these skills that we can't replicate, and we got to hire based off skills. No, you hire based off core values. You hire based off of GWC, or you keep somebody based off of GWC.
Yeah.
And when you build that discipline and you start seeing an organization, the conversations change to, this person's not a core value fit. It wasn't that they, blew up a lawnmower because they didn't put oil in it. It's because they were not a core value fit, because they were not taking ownership and responsibility or whatever it is. That people analyzer is my favorite.
Yeah, and I actually find, the key to using that well is having good core values, right?
Yes.
And I find that that's a good, I just call it marinating in it for 90 days at a time. Like when you draft the essence of your core values, then use that in your people analyzer, even if you haven't rolled that out, to gut check, are these the right ones,
Yeah.
And then, I assume everybody does know what GWC is, but for someone who's, self-implementing right now, let's talk about, or just give tips on how do you see, where do you start with people analyzer, and then how do you introduce it to your team?
Yeah. So we started based off of how we hire. So when we hire people in the organizations I've worked in, initially it was, based off skills, but then it was core values. And, you got to define those core values and be able to ask questions around those core values. And one of the things I learned early on was not to say, hey, are you a help first kind of guy? Sure, I'm a help first. You want to take ownership and responsibility? Oh yeah, absolutely. Are you humble? Man, I'm the most humble person you ever meet. If you ask the questions that way, you're going to get the answers that are not going to help you. But I challenge my teams to come up with questions that are their own, that help that person talk about that core value without asking them about the core value.
Yeah.
So tell me about a time where you had to take responsibility for something that wasn't your fault. Okay, well, that's a different question than do you take ownership and are you responsible?
Yeah.
So implementing that in the interview process and then implementing it as in the process of talking about team members every quarter and just rolling it out so that this is the way we do the evaluation. Another plug for 90, there's a great evaluation tool in there. I think it's called one-on-one or feedback, depending on which version you're in. And that maps it out very clearly. Are they a core value fit? Yes or no? And then GWC gets it, wants it, has capacity. Does the person get the job? Do they want the job? Do they have the capacity to do it? They've got to have all three. If you've got somebody that gets the job and has the capacity but doesn't want it, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So at that point, you got to figure out, is that person still a good fit for the team? And we just got to find a better seat. Do we have a seat? We may not have a seat. So.
Yeah, we're going through hiring process right now, and the W. This is a role that you can get people that are more interested in the external facing part or the internal facing part. But when we get to the wants it, I find a lot of people who say, "Well, I'll do it for now. I really want to be this."
Right.
And in previous, I would have probably hired that person because they're like, yeah, everything's a fit except you just want to come in and have a path to something else and we can get you there. But if they're not excited about it now, then that's most likely not going to be a good fit if they want it, but only to get somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to look at it on a quarterly basis because things will change. People's desires will change. Their long-term goals will change. And if it starts to where that seat's not aligning and they don't want that seat anymore, you got a tough decision to make. Do you need to you need to help them find another seat somewhere else, or is there another seat in the company that would be a good fit for them? So,
well, awesome. Well, I guess an opportunity here for you, like on the fractional side, different than the ENRG groups. Like, are you actively looking for clients right now? If someone's looking for a fractional integrator, should they contact you?
Not right now. They can definitely contact me. I'd be happy to have a conversation with them for two reasons. One, the three clients that I've got, I've got my schedule full right now with three. The three that I've got right now, they're not going to last forever. I mean, my whole concept and position is to work myself out of a job, and whether that takes 9 months or 12 months to work myself out of a job and help them find their full-time integrator, they're all going to be a little bit different. So I'm actively talking to people with the understanding that I'm not ready to take on a client now, and I might be ready in 6 to 9 months. But also, I've got a network of fractional integrators who are looking for clients. Yeah. So if I can help somebody find somebody else that could help them, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Awesome. Well, that's a good ending note on the idea of net weaving.
Net weaving,
and that's my takeaway for today. That's a powerful tool. I think that's what led us both here.
Yep, it is.
Let's keep in touch. And for anyone out there, if you're listening, you can find Forrest on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And
absolutely.
I hope you hear that we're just both passionate about business and EOS and helping others. So we're both here for you if we can help you in any way. And Forrest, I greatly appreciate your time today.